It's January, and really, this is the time when we start thinking about New Year resolutions and how all of the things that didn't go well last year are going to go well this year. And we're going to put effort and attention and put a lot of work into actually making this year the best year. And so I wanted to talk to you about change. How does change actually happen? How does transformation actually happen? And my thinking around this has changed quite a bit. And so before, I used to often think that change came out of effort. So, if we had a habit in a certain space, we did things a certain way, we were in a habit of doing it that way, that we needed to bring time, effort, and attention to change that, to wire in a new habit. And what I'm seeing differently now is that while the neuroscience might work that way, that as we do things, they get wired into our brain, we also I haven't met someone who doesn't have the example of someone kind of struggling to stop something, like stop smoking or stop overeating, or any of the things that are you hear a lot about. And they've struggled for years in doing that. They've put time and effort and attention to stop that particular habit. And they do for a certain amount of time, and then inevitably, the old habit comes back. But when it does kind of stick, that the individuals, when you talk to them, like, what made the difference? What was it that all of the other times were unsuccessful and this time there was a change? Often what you hear, it was, I just saw things differently. It just something clicked, something snapped. It was the last straw. And what's meant by that is that the reality that they were in before simply changed in an instant. And often it comes from a new insight, a new way of looking at things. And that new way just made the old pattern not make sense anymore. I hear my coach using this example a lot, and I like it for its simplicity. When you live in one house and then you move to another, you might a couple of times start driving and make your way to the old house, but the instant you realize that you're going to the old house and it makes no sense anymore, you just effortlessly start driving to the new house, right? And that speaks to the instance we see that our old pattern doesn't make sense, that the old pattern doesn't work in the new reality that we've come up with, that through this insight that we have, it takes no effort at all to drive to the new home, to implement this new thing. And so while we often put all of our all our eggs in the basket of effort and attention to make change and transformation happen, what I'm starting to see now is all of our eggs should be in the basket of insight, of seeing anew, of looking at in what reality does this kind of old pattern no longer make sense, right? Not cognitively, from a different place, from a place of insight, from a place of really seeing reality in a different light. And so how do we do that? How do we have a new insight? Well, there's one thing that I know for sure. I can't control my insights. I can't will myself to have an insight, but I can increase my chances of having an insight by looking in a direction, of settling all of my thinking, of my pros and cons, of all of my judgments around why I do this or why I don't do something different or why I haven't achieved something. All of that if I'm able to let that kind of go for a moment, right? And touch that place of presence, of peace, of just really grounding, and look in the direction of what I want, of this reality that I want to live. There's a bigger or a higher possibility of having an insight in that place. And sometimes you don't even need to kind of put the handrails of the thing you want to change. But the more we spend time in our grounding, the more we spend time in presence, the less it makes sense to do that stuff. Because what I've noticed for myself, any of these patterns that I have that are not serving, but have some kind of good intent, otherwise I wouldn't do them. Like if in the moment, the reality that I'm living in that very moment where that pattern happens, it must make sense to me to actually do that thing that I'm doing. Otherwise I wouldn't, right? I'm driving to the old house until I notice that it's the old house and not the new house. So when we're doing something, even when it's not serving in the long term, in that very moment, in that very reality that we've created for ourselves, it makes perfect sense. And so to the effect that we could drop that thinking, right, and become grounded and present, we're less likely to do that pattern. And to the effect that we can actually have a different reality around this thing, then also that old behavior makes less sense in this new reality. So those are two ways that I'm playing with around change and transformation, and what I've seen in terms of how change actually happens in my clients and in myself. That it changes effortlessly the minute the reality is different. And reality is not about changing the outside, right? The reality is the reality we're creating moment to moment, because that's how reality works, right? Reality is different for each person. That's why we get into so many disagreements. We're all living in our own little bubble of reality, and we think we're living in the same reality, but we're walking around in our own little set of reality based on whatever thinking we have in the moment. And so look at your own change. Look at what you're looking to transform or change this year. And rather than putting all of your time and effort into efforting your way to change, you can try that, you can do that. But we know that the majority of New Year resolutions don't work out. Like they don't become long-lasting patterns. Instead of that, have yourself spend more time in grounding and presence, and start looking at the reality where that old pattern just simply doesn't make sense anymore. And from there, you might have some insights that will inevitably make change effortless.